Hi, Soraya. Welcome. Just give other folks a moment or two to come in. Soraya, if you would like, let me know in the chat maybe where you are in the world and what where you are in your GRE process. It'd be nice to know a little bit. And what brings you to a free prep hour? Hi, Napri. Welcome. I'm asking everyone to say hi in the chat. Yeah, hi, Soraya. And to share maybe where you are in the world, if you would like to, and where you're at with the GRE. That's the big question I have. Where in this process are you? How are you feeling about it? Hi, Soraya.
Can you hear me?
I can, yeah. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? Where are you signing in from today?
I'm signing in from Georgia. I'm in a place called Locust Grove, but I'm from New York. And so I'm in Georgia today. And I'm here because I'm actually a returning student that's going back to school after raising my children and my husband and everyone else.
I love raising your children and your husband.
Right.
So true.
Finally, and I'm able to go back to school. So in talking to the dean, she said, well, take the GRE because we can, that's kind of the last step that you're going to need to enter back into school. And so that's now and starting from scratch.
Awesome. What types of programs are you thinking about?
Well, actually, I was a law student years and years ago. So I did all the LSAT, I did everything. And so they have all of my old documents and they were like, just take the GRE. That's kind of let us know where you are after all of these years. And so then I'll be able to finish and continue my career.
That's so cool. You're going to be a lawyer. I love that.
Yes.
Yay. We need more good lawyers.
Yes.
Awesome. Do you know much about the test? Have you done like some research on it? Are you kind of very fresh coming in?
Yeah, I did research on it, but I believe I looked at the wrong information because it scared me to it had all kind of trigonometry, it had chemistry I'd never seen before in life. And so she was like, but it's so easy. And I didn't vocabulary. I don't know what I logged into, but it scared me. Like I was like, I'm not taking this test. And she said, I think you might have looked at the wrong information. So I was like, let me come on to learn exactly what I should be looking at. And so the fear, kind of will be, when I saw one that looked more like it had vocabulary and different things that made sense. So I probably found the wrong path altogether. So I want to make sure I'm doing the right thing.
Good. I think I can hopefully reassure you today. There's definitely no trigonometry. I can't remember.
Hallelujah.
Trigonometry. I would fail if there were chemistry and trigonometry on this. I would not have this job.
Right.
I was not good at those things.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, super glad to have you here. It looks like we're going to have a very small group, which is great. And my plan today was actually to try to build the session around the questions and concerns that attendees had. The last one of these that I did was also quite small. So I was like, let's just see if we can do something that's really focused on what we need. And if there's only two of us, we can be really focused. Navpreet, I have another question for you, which is, when do you need to have your score by? Like, are you definitely going to apply this fall? Are you looking at business school? Are you looking at other types of programs? And when do you need to be done by? Because I think I want to start by talking a little bit about the old versus the new GRE. There's going to be
Right.
a new GRE and yeah. Soraya, what about you? What is your timeline for
Well,
finishing the
I wanted to
test?
try to get in this September, but the dean said that was very unrealistic.
Yep,
Because she said it's not about rushing to get in a certain time, it's about doing very well on the test. So I'd rather
yep,
you just focus on doing very well on the test, and if you need to retake for any reason, you have time to do that, and
yep,
then apply next year,
yep.
so that everything will be in ahead of time for September. Everybody will have what we need to make assessments. You'll be eligible for whatever, assistance there is. And so it's
Yep.
definitely not be this September, but the following September.
Great. I love that. Dean gave you really good advice. And maybe Navpreet can
Trying to grab
testify
it.
to this a little bit too, because been in a longer process, but it usually takes people longer than they want it to, or than they think it will. And so I think giving yourself this really long timeline, especially because you'll have to balance this with all the other things in your life, I think is
Yeah.
really wise. And I'm glad someone gave you that advice. That's good.
Thank you.
Yay.
Are you Kat?
I am Kat. Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Cool. And Navpreet, also not in any rush. I love it. So, Soraya, I know you've heard a little bit about the new test. Navpreet, what have you heard about the new test? Have you been thinking about that?
Me or someone else you're talking to?
Oh, Navpreet, yeah. Our
Okay.
other person.
Okay.
So yeah, I think for both of you, probably you're gonna want to do the new one. I think the new one is gonna be a more comfortable experience for most people.
Great.
It is
I didn't know there
only
wasn't.
2 hours instead of 4.
Yeah, I
What?
didn't know there wasn't. I didn't know there was a new one.
Yep, they are, and this is very recent, so if you haven't heard about it, it makes total sense. This just came out in like beginning of June, late May, early June. The GMAT business school one announced that they were getting shorter, and so the people who make the GRE then also sort of jumped on this bandwagon to announce that they were making a shorter test. Because it's so recent, I can't tell you like everything about it, but I can tell you some stuff about it.
Excellent.
Yes, yeah, yep. Navpreet, could you do me a huge favor, and would you be willing to use the chat instead of the Q&A feature? It's easier because I can see that it's easier for me to just have the chat open and to see it. Yeah, so then I can more quickly see what you're saying and answer your questions. Awesome. So let me start I'm going to start just by telling you a little bit about the new test and what it's going to be like, how it's going to be different, and we'll see what questions you have. And then we can, I think at that point, then I'll ask each of you to maybe think about, a few more questions or things you'd really like to discuss, and we'll focus the rest of the session around that, because it can be kind of like a three-person mini class, which will be really fun. Yay. All right. So let me see. Where am I start?
Okay, got it.
Let's start. So I'm going to say a little bit about the old test, just so you know like what it is and can sort of see why I think the new one is better. If anyone wants to ask more questions about the old test, they can, but I'm not going to emphasize it as much. Stop my slides. Need to set up my slides. All right, so what is the test? What is it like? It has, as Navpreet said, we're gonna start with 2 essays in the current version. Then we're going to have 2 verbal sections and 2 quant sections. So the essays come first, and that's just like you type into like a very, very simple text editor. It's, you know, way less fancy than Microsoft Word. There's no cut and paste. There's no spell check, which is always a challenge for me because I no longer know how to spell. That's the first hour. Then you're going to do a couple of the multiple choice sections. 2 of those will be verbal, 2 of those will be quant, and they're long. They each have 20 questions. I missed what you said. It kind of got cut off a little.
Did you hear? Was it me?
Yeah, I heard something, but it got cut off a little. I couldn't hear the full thing.
Oh, no, I'm just listening. Thank you.
Okay, cool. What's tricky, I think, about this structure, one is that it's very long, right? It's almost 4 hours long. I know that like I don't have a 4-hour attention span anymore after these last few years. So this is a big challenge, and fatigue and being able to pay attention, manage our attention over time. These are big things that are being tested here. You do get a 10-minute break in the middle, but it's short compared to the length of the test. The other thing that I think is not great about the current version is that you get this extra experimental section. This is a section that doesn't count for your score. They are literally just testing out new test questions on you. So you're paying them to be a guinea pig, and it can come at any time. So you'll know that like you got 3 verbal sections, right? And so it'll be like, oh, one of those verbal sections was experimental, but often we can't tell which one. So it sort of creates this extra uncertainty in a test when there's already a lot of uncertainty. Another challenge of this test is we often don't know what's going to come next. Oh, hey, we have someone else. Hi, Udeogo. Udeogu, I'm so sorry. Please correct me on pronouncing your name. Welcome, good to have you here. We have a small group, so we're doing a kind of choose your own adventure approach tonight, where I'm going to base our program off of the questions that folks had. We are starting with a discussion of the old test versus the new. There's a big shift coming up. And I think that's an important topic for everyone to think a little bit about. So we have a lot of uncertainty, right? And this is sort of what makes this a bummer. However, the new test is going to be different, and I think it's going to be a little bit better. The new test is, I'm in the wrong slide deck. So sorry. I just realized I gotta get the amended. We have like so many versions of the slides with all the changes that are coming out right now. But the new test is the short news is that the new test is going to be literally half the length. We're going to go from 4 hours down to 2. And that alone, I think, makes a pretty good argument for why it is a good idea to think seriously about waiting for the new test or focusing your efforts toward preparing for the new test, especially Soroya and Navpreet, because you guys have some flexibility in your timelines. I think that is really good. So this is what the new test is going to look like compared to the old one. It's like even like more pleasant to look at it than it is to look at the slide about the old one. This is happening on September 22nd, and it is a hard switch. So if you take the test on September 21st, you will take a 4-hour test. If you take it on September 22nd, you will take a 2-hour test. It's going to be very hard change. Only one essay, and it's the easier of the 2 essays, I think, the issue essay. So you only have to write for 30 minutes before you get into the remaining sections. Those sections are also going to be shorter, and there will be no experimental section. There will also be no break. If you are doing it with standard time, I suspect that there will be breaks for folks who have extended time. I don't know for sure what that will look like yet. There's still a lot we don't know about this, even though it is happening quite soon. So instead of doing 20 questions and then 20 questions in verbal and in quant, you're going to do 12 questions in the first section and then 15 in the second. So we'll go from having sections that are in the like 30 to 35-minute range to having sections that are in the 18 to 27-minute range. It's going to be a lot different. Content and scoring are going to be exactly the same. So if you've been preparing for the longer test, all of that work is going to carry over to the new test, which is great news. The only thing that's going to change is going to be some timing and strategy and kind of time management stuff. And that'll just take a little bit of adjusting. And then I think the task, my sense is this will feel lighter for everyone involved. If you are thinking about doing, if you're not sure, if you're on the fence, if there's some ambiguity in your timeline, questions are not going to get harder or easier, right? We're going to see the same kind of difficulty range of questions, the same types of questions, the same types of content. It will probably take about as long to prepare because you'll have to learn the same extent of the content, and then you'll have to practice it, and then you'll have to keep practicing a little bit. I also think that it will still be, if anyone is looking to get like a very high score on this test, I would think of very high scores as like 160 and above. I think that will still be a very challenging thing to do. I don't know if that will necessarily get wildly easier. However, this is the big win, I think, because I work with a lot of students in classes and tutoring. I've been doing this for 8 years. I've seen many people go through the process of preparing for this test. I've seen a lot have success. I've seen some people not have success. I can talk about what differentiates those two if anyone wants. But I know that being tired, being anxious, being stressed, having a hard time focusing, especially in the verbal, because the passages are so, folks who've done a GRE, I think the passages are so dense, they're so boring, they're written in this like really strange kind of foreign academic English that is so far away from any English that any of us uses in our daily lives. And I think when you have less of that to do, it's just going to make it much easier to stay focused, to stay calm. A couple other side effects of it being shorter, we think, this is now I'm in the land of like, we're conjecturing a little bit. Because there's fewer questions, I think that each question will therefore count a little bit more. And this may make the results a little more volatile. So that, these days, right, if I see someone scoring like 154, 155, 156 on a practice test, I'm pretty confident they can go take an official test and they're going to score in like the 154 to 157 range. I expect a little variation, like plus or minus 2 points, but it's relatively stable. That range may get wider. So if you've recently scored a 155 on a practice test, it may be the case that when you take the shorter test, your sort of expected score range could be like a 152 to a 160. So there'll be a little more upside, a little more downside. Essentially what I'm saying is chance is going to play and luck is going to play a slightly larger role because each time you take the test, it's different. And so there's still a bit of luck. This is why I think many of us should prepare for it and expect to take this test, 2 times, maybe more. I see people take it 3 or 4 times to get where they want to be. So there is a bit of a myth that like, if you don't get your score after X number of sittings, you never will. Completely untrue. I've seen all kinds of trajectories. I've seen people prepare in 2 weeks. I've seen people prepare in 2 years and be successful in both cases. So this may mean especially that you want to be able to take it multiple times because it may be the case that like getting to your goal score is just sitting the test on a day when the vocabulary words and the math content all line up well with your strengths. And a bad day may just be some bad luck where it doesn't line up as well. Partly why, one thing I just want to say related to that is I think a good framework for all of us, we will all run out of time before we run out of things we can learn and improve for this test. And that's fine because we are not aiming for perfect. We do not need to know 100% of 100% of the content. I think if we can get to 80% of 80% of the content, we are great. 70% of 70% of the content can also be great, right? And we'll all have kind of different aims and different goals because we're looking at different types of programs, have different backgrounds, etc. I think a common mistake that I see is people become obsessed with, perfectionizing 100% of 100% of things. And I see that lead to kind of inefficient use of study time. So I think that's just a good thing to keep in mind throughout this process. It's not like a high school test where we're like, oh, trying to get 95% to get an A. We can get 80% of questions right and be at a great place. The final thing that I actually think will also happen with the new test, because there are fewer questions, I think that it will be even more important to not make little mistakes. Careless errors. I call them little mistakes because I don't think they happen because we're careless, right? I think they actually sometimes happen because we care enormously. I don't think I work with anyone who has like a I don't care attitude about this test, right? Like you wouldn't be here if you didn't care about it. So I don't think they're careless errors. I just think they're little mistakes that happen. They often have to do with like attention, mindset, habit. They're sort of our bad habits in a way. They, I think, are going to have a bigger impact in the new test. These are always an important thing to work on, and really one of the fastest ways to bring up your score is to get rid of these. I'm not saying it's easy, but it can be done in a relatively short amount of time. This will become more important than it already is. Finally, the test also will still be available both online to take it home and in person in the test center. Final thing that I want to say, there are no practice tests available for this test yet because it has just been announced. It is very new. There are still things we don't know. What I've kind of described to you is pretty much the extent of what we know, and even the exact number of questions in each section is a little uncertain still. We will continue to know more. I continue to update people as I learn more. We are aiming to have August practice tests available. And I suspect that, other test prep providers are also racing to have these available. The last that I heard, the ETS official practice tests for this new format, ETS people who make the GRE, will not be available until September. So if you are, I have some students who have been doing this for a minute, a couple months, a lot of months, and who have now decided they want to wait for the new test. What I've been suggesting for those folks is, if you've been at this for a while, this could be a great time to take a break and say like, cool, Navpreet, I think for you, actually, this might be great because you've just done an official test. You're kind of regrouping, dive back in. I would say like take July off. Don't think about the GRE. Take it off, come back in August when the new tests are coming out, and then start practice, take a practice test for the new format, see what happens, and then you can readjust your plan to account for the experience you have with the new format. I suggest this because I think, and Soraya, I think this will be something for you to keep in mind. I would just start now like you are, but then something to keep in mind if the process becomes longer for you. I think like the maximum stretch that we should study for without taking a break is about 6 months. After 6 months, I start to see, yes, Navpreet, I love it. I'm so happy to hear that. I always say, like, after you take an official test, take at least 2 weeks off, take a month off if you can, take 6 weeks off if you can. And what I see is that after 6 months, people start to just get tired because it's a lot. to be studying all this stuff. It requires that we reach back to like math we maybe did in elementary school in some cases. And it, you know, a lot of folks I work with haven't been in school for a while. So there's just like a lot of effort that goes into this process. Around 6 months, it just starts to get tiring. So that's a great place if you're not yet where you want to be. Plenty of folks are not yet where they want to be at 6 months. That's very normal. Stop, step away, and then come back when you are a little bit more refreshed. And what I see every time I've had a student take a break, I've had students take breaks for a month, 3 months, 6 months, a year. What I always see is things are better when they come back. Some of the content's rusty, right? We got to do a little refreshing, normal, but so much gets better, not only because you're rested and you've kind of reset from burnout, but also because there's a lot of, you know, our mind does a lot of work that we are not conscious of. And when we step away from a task, it allows for a certain amount of consolidation of that task in our sort of underlying layers of our mind, and things get better without our directly looking at them. And it's important to have time where you're not directly looking at the task. So if Udeogu, if you are really keen, like maybe let me know when you want to apply by. If you are really keen to apply this year and you're doing business school, then you will need to do the older test. So anyone aiming for a business school application for 2024, so starting in 2024, needs to do the longer test. Business schools are not going to accept the shorter test for this cycle. It is because the shorter GMAT will not yet be available, and I think this is the way they are trying to make it fair. But then it puts anyone who wants to apply, you know, like any round to business school this year in a position of needing to be done before September 21st, which is tough.
Yeah.
All right, that's what I want to say about yep, same test for MBA. You know, the GMAT is also getting shorter, so there will be a shorter GMAT, but it's going to be exactly the same. I don't, you know, next year everyone's going to be applying with a shorter test. You don't get bonus points for having a longer test done. And otherwise it'll be the same. Yeah. All right, that is what I wanted to say about awesome. I love it. So are you starting out now, or have you been studying for a while?
I can't hear him.
Cool. So yeah, I think you're wise. Like start now, start kind of getting into the content and the questions, and then I think around the time that you're probably ready to start doing more time practice will be in September. Just generally, people tend to spend like, you know, 6 to 8 weeks on foundations and then start shifting to timed practice. So it'll be actually perfect timing for both you and Soroya with the new test.
Thank you.
Yay. Soroya, what's your question?
Thank you. In law school, when I went to the dean, they gave me an option because I thought I would have to take that LSAT again, but they was like, that's not necessary because I took it before. So in some cases, law school, they do take the GRE as well, correct?
Yes, they do.
Very good. That's what I was talking.
Yeah. I don't know yet, like what's gonna happen with the shorter GRE in law school. Exactly. I law schools will take it. But the LSAT is not yet announced it's getting shorter. So the LSAT I'm just sort of curious what's gonna happen with the LSAT. But yeah, law schools started taking GRE a while back, and I think they are, you know, truly don't seem to care.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. No, Preet, You do not have an option. It is a very hard switch. So if you take it before September 21st, you will take the longer test. If you take it after September 21st, you will take the shorter test. If you are applying to business school this year, which I don't, it sounded like you were going to apply like next year. If you were applying this year for admittance in 2024 or for incoming class of 2024, you have to take the longer test. If you're going to apply next year, take the shorter test. Cool. All right, that's what I wanted to say about this test. And then, like I said, we have a small group, and I already kind of wanted to do a choose our own adventure class today for this. So I would love it if you guys could take a moment, think about what questions do you most want to ask and put them in the chat. And then I will kind of collect them and organize them and try to create sort of some kind of lesson where we get to all of the questions. So think for a moment, put them in the chat because it'll help me to have them all like in writing, and then that'll help me organize my thoughts. And then we'll see, once I've done those questions, then maybe we'll do another round. We'll see where we're at in terms of time.
Sure.
I'm just making a list here so I can keep track of everything, make sure I get it all answered.
That's strategies and materials.
Cool. All right. You're welcome to toss out other questions as we go. I'm going to start with these. We'll see. I think I can do these by 9 o'clock. We're going to get through them. I'm going to start with your questions because you are in a slightly different situation. And then I'm going to pivot to talk more about the kind of foundational questions that have come up. So Napreet, I'll start with you. So that way also, if you're like, I don't need to go through this review of the basics, you're welcome to drop out a little bit early. Ooh, that's a good one. Extra practice tests. Cool. Awesome. I'm gonna kind of lump that in under extra tasks. Great. All right. So Napreet, for you, I'm going to start with recovering from burnout because I think that's going to determine your timeline. So because you have a lot of time, right? Like you're thinking about applying for next year, you have plenty of time, no rush. Wait until you feel some energy and excitement about the task is number one. Give yourself enough time to fully recover, because I think what I see happening, and my goodness, I feel this in my own life in so many ways, is like just starting to get over it and then plunging back into it. And then you get burned out again really fast because you haven't fully recovered. So for me, one way that I know that I'm recovered from burnout is, okay, I'm starting to feel like this energy building up, like, yeah, I want to go for it. I want to do it. That I think is really, really a good sign and important. The other thing that I think helps enormously with recovering from burnout is just like do things that bring you joy and help you rest. So I think just focusing on all the other things in your life. And then I might also think about, not right now, but as you start to come back to this process, how could you create better balance in your like life, work, study triangle next time around? And are there any changes you can make? Can you shift anything to make your life easier? Excellent. So first two I would do now, as you start to get maybe a little closer to wanting to restart, I would do that. Then, and before you book your next test, I would take a practice test for the new format. And you could do one that comes out in August. You don't have to do an official one. See how close you are to where you want to be, and then use that. If you're pretty close, within like, 3 points of goal, then I would say October is fine. But if you're more than 3 points away, then you might want to wait to book and see like, okay, let me study for a few weeks and see where I'm at, take another practice test, see how fast things are improving. Ideally, you want to take the test once and only once you have gotten at or like very close to your goal score on a practice test. I do see some instances where people overperform recent practice tests, but that's relatively rare. All right. Hopefully, in terms of sources of extra practice tests, Kaplan, Princeton Review, like I think pretty much every test prep provider has a free test. And I would do that. I would eventually come back and retake the ETS test. I think when enough time has passed, I would come back and redo those 5 tests. I also would encourage you to do more timed sets and maybe less full practice tests. That might be, the other thing to keep in mind is how we study is as important as how much we study. And it may be that what if you feel like you're a bit stuck in the process, and this is true for everyone, often the solution is just to change something about how you're studying. That brings me to these 2 really astute questions. These are all really good questions. I like doing this choose your own adventure. what are the best materials? What are best practices? I'm going to start with best materials. I would get the ETS official guide. And if you have materials you really like and want to recommend to everyone, please do. That would be great. The ETS official guide, it's like the book that the people who make the GRE make. They also make verb and quant supplements, and I would get those too. These two books are really important because all of the questions in them were at one point on the official test. So these are the questions that are the best predictors of what the official test is going to be like. I would also get the Manhattan Prep 5-pound book. And I say that not solely because I work here, but because it's just a really good resource. It has a ton of problems. They're organized by topic and by difficulty. And so it helps for very targeted practice. The other tool that I would get is the Kaplan Q Bank or Question Bank. This is a tool for making time sets, and you can sort by topic and format and difficulty. Those are the things that I think are most important for practice. In terms of reacquainting yourself with the math, there's a few different options. For learning, for vocab, I think the Magoosh app is a popular one that I've seen a lot of students like in particular. Preet, sounds like you've used that. And then in terms of learning the math, there's a couple options. If you like to read, I think that our strategy guides are pretty good. There's one for quant, one for verbal, and if you're like, I like to read things and learn things by like reading and doing practice problems, that's great. If you want something where you watch and, a little more like interactive, we make an online GRE course called Interact that is like a standalone self-study product. Relatively affordable compared to this process can get so expensive. So that's a good one. These free prep hours are archived on YouTube. It's like Manhattan Prep GRE. We also made a vocabulary word of the day series that is a good resource, I think. And they are free. So these free prep hours, we've done them for years. We have covered every topic that you could imagine. They're all like everything you ever want to know about the GRE is in this archive of free prep hours. They're just not very organized. So it takes a little bit of effort to sift through them, but I think it's like one of the best underutilized free resources out there. They're all taught by Manhattan Prep, our thing is like great teachers. Let's hire great teachers. Let's train them. Let's support them. And these are always taught by like folks who've been here a long time. And the people who did this before me have done it even longer and are like even more knowledgeable. So just that's something I think is great, and it is free. And that's nice. So those are my, Khan Academy can also be helpful. Again, you will find in Khan Academy explanations of all of the GRE topics. Khan Academy goes into much deeper math. So you'll want to just like check the GRE math content and then go find it on Khan Academy. And if you're wondering what math is tested on the GRE, you want to see in detail, you're going to find that in the official guide. I don't like the way they explain the math. I don't think it's a great place to learn it, but it is the place that will tell you what math is fair game for the test. There's no trig. It's mostly like basic algebra, basic geometry, basic stats, fractions, decimals, percents, number properties, things like number lines, positives, negatives. Probably the hardest topics that show up are probability and combinatorics, and they're very rare. You're like, what is combinatorics? Do not stress. You really never need to know in order to do well on this test. You may choose to, but you don't have to. In terms of best practices, that's one that I cannot answer quickly for you, but I'm going to give you a couple suggestions for starting out. Best practices is really like a long conversation to have. But I think for folks starting out, what's really important to keep in mind, consistency matters a lot more than the volume. So if you are new to this process, and I would say for you, when you come back, I would take this approach too. Focus on doing it 6 out of 7 days, 5 or 6 out of 7 days, depending on sort of the bandwidth of your life and what else you have going on. And start with 20 minutes a day, 15 to 20 minutes a day. If you need to do 10 minutes, that's fine. So begin just by saying, I'm going to look a little bit at this each day. Now, you don't need understanding where you are on the overall score chart regularly. I would do practice tests at most every 2 weeks. I use them as diagnostic and assessment tools. Then I use the time sets to actually build the skills I identify on the test. So, really, I think for most people, like once every 3 weeks, especially in a longer timeline, is fine. And I only have someone take one when we agree that that person has made substantive progress on the main issues from the last test. And that usually takes 2 weeks. If someone's moving fast, usually takes 3 to 4. They are great diagnostic and assessment tools, but by themselves, they do not build skill, and they take up a lot of time and energy, which is why I think, 90% of your time is going to be short time sets. Max 10% of your time is going to be practice tests. I say this with enormous confidence, having worked with, hundreds of people over the last 8 years. Like, that's just a true thing. And I think, I understand the temptation to take lots of practice tests, but I just see that, in most cases, it does not yield the results that people want. So that's my one thing. This week, just start, like, if you can do 10 minutes a day for the next 5 days, amazing. Then do 15 minutes next week. If you can't do 10 minutes a day, shoot for 10 minutes a day next week, but start small and build. This is a marathon, not a sprint. And it's this like consistency of work that's the most important to establish as the foundation. The next thing I would say for best practices starting out, take a practice test as soon as the new ones are available. Just even if you don't feel ready, right? Just to see where am I, to understand where you're beginning. And then I would wait at least a few weeks until you take the next one. I speak also from experience. When I was thinking about teaching the LSAT, which I ultimately decided not to do, I took a practice test and I didn't get the score I want. So then a few days later, I was like, I'm just gonna take another one. And then a few days later, like, I really wanted it to be done. And so I just kept taking these practices, hoping it would magically be done. And surprise, it did not result in what I wanted to. So I also speak, just having done that, I know it's tempting. It's tempted me, and I also know why it doesn't work because I've done it. And then I think the final thing to keep in mind starting out is it takes about 5 petitions over a few weeks at least for something to stick. This is true of a word, this is true of a math concept, whatever it is. So as you're going through all this content, learning, relearning, understanding the test, relearning the math, learning vocabulary, be patient with yourself. It's normal to see something one week, then come back the next week and feel like you've forgotten a lot. That's how our brains work. They forget a lot. So give yourself time and patience to get in these repetitions, slow and steady over time. And those, I think, are the most important things in terms of best practices starting out. All right. I've done like the existential questions. I want to spend the last 10 minutes answering your questions, Soraya, about what to expect in each section. So if you're good and you're like, I've got my questions answered, you are welcome to drop out. If you want to stay and sort of be here for this general overview, we are going to do that. I'm going to start with these questions, and then I'm going to switch to a couple different slide decks actually to answer these two questions. All right. So, regardless of whether you're going to take the old or the long or the short one, a few things are going to be consistently true between tests. And those are things that have to do with the scoring and the online versus in person. Online versus in person is absolutely a choice that each person has to make for themselves. My observation is that students are generally split about 50-50 between these two. Folks who've come in recently, hi, we're doing Choose Your Own Adventure Q&A today. We only have 10 minutes left, so we're going to focus a little bit on these structural questions. Test center, pluses and minuses. You are in a room with other people who are not on the same timeline as you. So there will be a little bit of like people moving, little sounds in the background. They do offer noise canceling headphones for you, but it's not like a completely still environment. There's a proctor who, may walk around. They may kind of sit outside the room and look in through a window. You do your scratch work with paper and pencil. These do sometimes, busy times of year like the fall, busy places like major cities, test centers can fill up. So you need to book a bit more in advance. And there's usually only a morning and an afternoon sitting. So there's kind of two different times of day, morning and afternoon, that you can choose from. At home, you do it on your own computer in your own room. Somebody watches you through a webcam. You have to download a software that allows them to like take control of your computer, close down all of their apps. Big difference here. You have to do your scratch work on an erasable surface. Whereas at the test center, they give you paper and pencils. It's unlined white paper. You can make the erasable surface work for you. For example, like I know I can do 4 questions on my erasable surface. So every 4 questions, I know, pause, check on the time, take a little reset. You can use it to your advantage. You get more options for when you can take it. It's a lot more flexible. You can do it, any day of the week. You can do it almost any time of day. I think the big questions to consider in making this choice are, will my home environment and internet connection be good, right? Will I, I live in New York City. My home environment is not quiet and my internet connection is not super reliable. So that might be a way to make that decision. I don't know why Optimum is so bad, but they're so bad. Will my home environment, and then which environment will you feel most like comfortable and energized in? I tend to see 2 things. I have some students where going to the test center is like, they get super pumped up. It gives them a little extra edge, a little extra focus, some adrenaline. Like they like that like being in that different environment. It's a little settling and it feeds them. I have other students who get super anxious in that environment, and to be at home in an environment that's familiar and comfortable allows them to be a lot more relaxed and present. Some people get to it. Like for me, I don't do well paying attention at home if I have to take one of these tests, because there's a lot around here that I'd rather be doing. So I need to be in a place where there's nothing that I'd rather be doing, right? Like I have to be there. But I see both options being really good for both people, for different people. And that these are the things that I think about when I help someone make this choice. All right. And then the other questions about how many times can you take it? You can take it up to 5 times in a year. There's no lifetime limit. you must wait 3 weeks between tests. So if, for example, you're working with a deadline, I usually say, like, think about the last day you could take it before the deadline, count back 3 weeks. That is the latest you should take your first test. We always want to try to give ourselves room to take it at least twice, maybe more. You do not ever, well, actually, this is not totally true. If you are not applying to law school, you never have to send all of your scores. So you can take it multiple times, and you can choose to send this option. Any just means I can choose to send any one of the multiple times I've taken this test. Law school, to make the GRE comparable with LSAT, you have to report all sittings in the last 5 years. I don't think it's a big deal, because I think if you take it once, you come back, you take it again, you do better. Like, that shows that you can study for a test and learn a new skill and be persistent and demonstrate improvement. Like, I think that just demonstrates things that are going to reflect really well on you in your application. So I wouldn't stress too much, sorry, about like taking it multiple times. For other folks, take it as much as you want within the 5 times a year limit, and you can choose what you want to send. All right. I think, and then, finally, you have to pay the whole fee every time you take it. ETS is very keen. They will get as much money out of you as they possibly can. If you reschedule a test, right, you sign up for and you have to reschedule, you can do that up until 4 days before the test, but you pay a $50 fee. If you want to send score reports to more than 4 schools, or you want to send score reports after your test day, $30 per school. So they're going to do everything they can to make this as expensive as possible. That's why I was like, let's find some good free resources, right? Like, let's offset that cost a little bit as much as possible. And for my final act, I'm going to just talk a little bit about what a quant section looks like and what a verbal section looks like and what types of questions. I'm going to show you the different types of questions. And then that will probably be our time for today. If anyone else has little questions you want to throw in the chat, do it. If I have time, I will shout them out quickly. Quant section. 20 problems, 35 minutes. This is the old test. The new test is going to be probably something more like 12 to 15 questions, and then like 22 to 27 minutes, but we just don't know. So I'm going to talk about what happens in this test. I think the new test will be similar, but there's still a lot that's unknown, unfortunately. However, you will still see, I think, the same question formats in the same order. Quantitative comparison, those come first 7 or 8 problems. Those are questions where we compare 2 things. I'm going to show you what all these look like in a second. Discrete quant, these are more like our normal math problems, our normal multiple choice questions. Glad I could answer your questions. Data interpretation, this is where we get a graph or a set of graphs and we answer some questions about them. Discrete quant, again, like normal kind of math problems, mostly multiple choice, not all. And I'll show you what these look like. Quantitative comparison, these are those ones that come first. You get a little bit of information, you get a quantity A, a quantity B, and your job is to say, do I know for sure that quantity A is greater? Do I know for sure that quantity B is greater? Do I know that they are equal, or can I not tell? Oh, good question. I have no idea. That is so out of my control, unfortunately. And I we've lost a lot of staff, so I actually don't know how soon. But I believe probably in the next week would be my guess. But I actually don't know that, unfortunately. Or maybe we say we don't know. These are a good place, I think, to start if you're new, because this is a format that is unique to the GRE. So most people need a little bit more time to get comfortable with these. So when I teach a class, these are what we start with. Discrete quant, right? These are like the normal math problems. About 2/3 of them are this 5-answer multiple choice that I think if any folks, did SAT, did ACT, this will be the most familiar format. About 1/3 ask you to select more than one. These little black boxes here tell us that we're allowed to select more than one. And some are fill in the blank. And they'll always be very clear, right? Like type in an integer, round to the nearest tenth, put in a fraction. They'll tell you exactly what format to enter. They're not necessarily harder. They can just be more unsettling because we don't have answer choices. Data interpretation. Oh my gosh, I don't know why I have an alarm set for 9. That's so weird. It was not to mark the ends of this. I actually think that was from yesterday. Data interpretation, we get a graph or a pair of graphs, and then we answer 3 questions about it. So it's a little bit actually like what we do in reading, where we have to sort of process some dense information and then answer multiple questions. That's quant. And then in these formats, the topics are all mixed up. So we could see geometry and quantitative comparison, geometry and discrete quant. Data interpretation tends to be mostly stats and percents because it's data. It goes with the territory. So that's quant. I know we're at 9, but I just want to very quickly do a quick rundown of the same stuff for verbal. So a verbal section, this is where we're going to get into the vocab. One thing I do want to say about vocab, the trend that me and my colleagues and my students have been observing is toward more accessible vocabulary. So even compared to what's currently in the ETS materials, what I hear is that vocab is not quite as bad as people expect. Doesn't mean you shouldn't still put time into learning words. I think that's still important. You're gonna see kind of weirder, more esoteric vocab in reading as well as in these questions. But I think it's good news that it's often not as bad as people think it's gonna be. First, we get text completion. That's one of these 2 types of vocab questions. I say in scare quotes because they're also about reading. Then we do some of the normal reading comprehension. I'll show you the different types of reading comp in a moment. I'll show you what the vocab questions look like. Then we do something called sentence equivalence. It's just the other type of vocab question. Then we come back to more reading. The big difference between the 2 types of vocab, in text completion, we pick 1 answer for each blank. In sentence equivalence, we pick 2 answers for each blank. Here is text completion. We could have 1 blank, we could have 2 blanks, we could have 3 blanks. We want to pick a word that best fits the meaning of the sentence out of the list. So these are about knowing words, but they're also about unpacking critical reading of sentences. Sometimes the sentences are where the difficulty is, not the answer choices. That is also true for the other type of vocab question. This is where we get 1 blank, but we put 2 words in it. We need to fit the meaning of this sentence, but we also need to pick 2 words that are similar. So we're looking for 2 words with similar meanings that can both be plugged into the sentence so that we're trying to create like 2 different versions of the same sentence in this question. So that's vocab. And then let me quickly speed ahead to show you what the reading questions look like. So reading, we get a few of these short passages. We know it's short because it all fits on 1 screen. That's a short passage. And we usually have 2 to 3 questions based on it, occasionally 1, but mostly 2 to 3 questions. Always look at this little blue bar in reading comp. See how many questions you have ahead of you. I think a lot of us, including me, tend to skim over this. It's helpful to know. So we see this and we see a few different types of questions with short passages. We're going to see at least probably only 1 long passage on a test. So 1 verbal section may not even have a long passage. Typically 3 to 4 questions, sometimes 5, and you have to scroll up and down. So these are a little bit harder just because we have to do a lot more reading up front before we get into the questions. We are also going to see some logic questions. They're also called argument questions. There's a very short passage and then just one question. And these are not so much asking us about what the passage says, they're asking us about how someone's fitting ideas together, what their reasoning is. This is like half of the LSAT. So Saray, I feel like you've done the LSAT in the past. This will probably feel familiar. There's just, if you didn't like them, the GRE is going to be a good fit because there's not a lot of them. We will also see some different question formats. We'll see some multiple choice. We'll see some where we choose more than one. We'll see some where we select a sentence in the passage, and those could occur with different types of passages. All right, that is my quick rundown of format. Oh, something I do want to say, if you want a longer introduction to any of this, that can be found by coming to a free class. So you can take the first session of our course for free. We'll go, whoever's teaching will go way more in depth with like structure, different question types. You'll learn foundational and verbal strategies. You'll talk about how to prepare. It's 3 hours long. So check it out. I think there's one coming up soon. I don't know. I'm not starting a new class again until September. So if you want to do a class or check out a free class in like mid to late September, I'll be teaching one on day nights. But we have some other folks running them too, and you can check out our website. And then final thing, I'm going to put in the chat my email in case anyone wants to follow up about anything. I will do my best to answer questions provided they aren't super involved, but if you aren't sure where to start or where to go or what to use, let me know. And then I also write a newsletter in which I draw tarot cards and interpret them in relation to study for the GRE. So I started this because I wanted to create a resource that was very specifically about how to study. And that's the main focus of this newsletter, because I think that's like maybe the most important knowledge that I have to impart to people. And I would like to for free and hopefully in a way that's fun. I do like little problems and solutions, and I'll talk a little bit about problem solving and content too, but it's mostly going to be about how to study. All right, that's all I got. Thank you so much for being here. We had a small group. It was really fun to have you all participating more. And I thank you. I will maybe see you in a class or in another free prep hour. We do these every month, so come back.
All righty. Thank you, Kat.
You're welcome, Soraya. Have a good night.
You
Bye,
too.
everyone.
Bye.
Take care.